The wedding was set to be a beautiful affair. White roses adorned the aisles, soft music played in the background, and guests eagerly awaited the bride's grand entrance. Linda Carter, the groom's mother, sat in the front row, smiling as she watched her son, Jake, stand nervously at the altar. But as the ceremony began, something felt off. At first, it was just a nagging feeling, a whisper of doubt in the back of her mind. Then, as she observed her soon-to-be daughter-in-law, Emily, a strange detail caught her eye. Linda's heart pounded. Something wasn't right. And within moments, she made a decision that would leave the entire room in stunned silence. Linda's pulse quickened. She had always trusted her instincts, and right now, they screamed at her that something was wrong. She glanced at Jake, her son, standing at the altar, his face glowing with nervous excitement. Then she looked at Emily, beautiful, poised, and seemingly perfect in her white gown. But Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something about her was off. Her hands tightened around the edges of her seat as her mind raced. It wasn't the dress, nor the way Emily carried herself. It was something deeper, something in the way she avoided eye contact, the way her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her veil. Then Linda saw it, a fleeting glimpse of panic in Emily's eyes when their gazes met. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Linda's breath hitched. She had spent years working as a family counselor, helping people navigate relationships, trust, and deception. She had learned to recognize the subtle signs of distress, fear, and even dishonesty. And in that moment, she knew Emily was hiding something. The officiant's voice broke through her thoughts. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. A moment stretched into eternity. Linda's heart pounded in her chest. The room was filled with expectant faces, guests waiting for the ceremony to continue. Then, before she could second-guess herself, Linda stood up. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Jake's brows furrowed in confusion. Emily's fingers gripped her bouquet tightly, her knuckles turning white. "Mom!" Jake's voice was soft, cautious. Linda swallowed hard. She had no proof, no certainty. Only a deep, unshakable feeling that something was terribly wrong. But she also knew she couldn't ignore it. Not when her son's future was on the line. "I need to speak with Emily," Linda said, her voice steady but firm. "Alone." A hushed murmur spread across the room. The officiant hesitated. Jake looked between his mother and his fiancée, confusion clouding his face. Emily, however, stood frozen. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to protest, but no words came out. Then, as if realizing she had no choice, she nodded. The two women stepped away, the eyes of the entire room following them. The air was thick with tension, anticipation. Linda led Emily into a small side room, closed the door behind them, and turned to face her. "Emily," Linda said gently but firmly, "tell me the truth. What are you hiding?" Emily's eyes welled with tears. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then her shoulders shook, and she let out a ragged breath. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. Linda's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily looked down at her hands, twisting the delicate fabric of her dress. Then, with a shuddering breath, she met Linda's gaze. I have to tell you something, she said. Something that could change everything. Linda felt a chill run down her spine. The room was silent except for the faint hum of voices outside. She could see the turmoil in Emily's eyes, the weight of whatever secret she carried pressing down on her. Taking a careful step forward, Linda softened her voice. Emily, whatever it is, I need you to be honest with me. You're about to marry my son. If something isn't right, we need to face it now. Emily's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as she wiped at a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Then, with a voice so quiet it was barely above a whisper, she confessed, I lied to Jake about who I am. Linda's heartbeat thundered in her chest. What do you mean? Emily swallowed hard. My real name isn't Emily. The words hung between them like a storm cloud about to break. Linda's mind raced. Then who are you? Emily hesitated, then took a shaky breath. My name is Sarah Collins. 5 years ago, I disappeared. Linda's stomach dropped. The name sounded familiar, too familiar. She searched her memory, and then it hit her. A cold realization seeped through her veins. Sarah Collins, the young woman who had vanished without a trace years ago. The case had made national headlines. It was a story of mystery, fear, and unanswered questions. No body had ever been found. No clues had ever surfaced. Until now. Linda's hands gripped the back of a chair for support. You're that Sarah Collins? Emily, Sarah, nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. I had no choice, she said, her voice breaking. I had to run. I had to become someone else. Linda's mind reeled. If Emily, Sarah, had been hiding her identity, there had to be a reason so terrifying that she had erased her past and built a new life. But why? And why now, on her wedding day, was it all coming undone? Before Linda could ask, Sarah's breath hitched. She cast a glance at the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. Then, lowering her voice, she whispered, He's here. A shiver ran down Linda's spine. Who's here? Sarah's fingers dug into her arms, her voice barely audible. The man I ran from. For a moment, Linda couldn't breathe. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She turned toward the door, toward the crowd waiting outside, guests, family, and him. Whoever he was out there, watching, waiting. And suddenly, the wedding wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a trap. Linda felt her blood run cold. She had expected anything. A hidden past, a broken engagement, even a confession of infidelity. But not this. Not the revelation that her soon-to-be daughter-in-law was a missing woman. And that someone dangerous was here, in the very same room, hiding in plain sight. She forced herself to stay calm. Sarah, she said, keeping her voice steady. Who is he? What does he want? Sarah swallowed hard. I don't know his real name, she admitted, but for years I called him David. The name sent a shudder through her, as if just saying it could summon him. She clutched her arms tightly. I was 18 when I met him. He was charming, older, someone I thought I could trust. But little by little, he took control of my life. He isolated me from my family, made me afraid of the outside world. And when I finally tried to leave, her voice broke. He wouldn't let me. Linda's grip tightened around the chair. So you ran? Sarah nodded, eyes glistening with fear. I staged my own disappearance. I changed everything, my name, my appearance, my history. I've been running for 5 years. But if he's here, it means he found me. Linda's heart pounded. She turned toward the door, her mind racing. The reception hall was full of guests, all blissfully unaware that among them was a predator. And Jake, her son, was standing out there, completely defenseless. She grabbed Sarah's hands. Listen to me. We have to be smart about this. If he's here, we can't let him know we're onto him. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, but her breath was uneven. Linda squeezed her hands reassuringly. You're not alone anymore. We'll get through this. But first, we need to find out who he is. Taking a deep breath, Linda pulled open the door. The murmur of the crowd greeted them as they stepped back into the reception hall. The guests were still waiting, whispering amongst themselves about the sudden interruption. Jake's eyes locked onto them instantly. Concern was written all over his face. Mom? Emily? His gaze flickered between them. What's going on? Sarah hesitated, her lips trembling, but Linda spoke first. Just a moment, sweetheart, she said with a reassuring smile, though her heart was pounding. She scanned the crowd, her motherly instincts sharper than ever. Someone in this room was hunting Sarah, and she had to find him before he made his move. She inhaled deeply, her mind working fast. She had spent years reading people, understanding their tells, their habits. Somewhere in this crowd, there was a man who shouldn't be here. Then she saw him. He was standing near the back, dressed like any other guest. A well-fitted suit, a polite smile, a champagne glass in his hand. He looked normal, but something about the way he stood, the way his eyes lingered just a second too long on Sarah, sent every alarm in Linda's mind blaring. He wasn't nervous like the other guests. He wasn't confused. He was waiting. Their eyes met, and for the briefest moment, Linda saw it, recognition. He knew she had figured it out. And then he moved. Linda's breath caught in her throat as the man, David, turned toward the exit, his movements calm but deliberate. He was leaving. He had seen the recognition in her eyes, and now he was slipping away, disappearing back into the crowd like a ghost. Not this time. Without thinking, Linda grabbed Sarah's hand and whispered, "Stay with Jake. Don't let him out of your sight." Then she moved. Years of being a mother had sharpened her instincts, when to step back, when to push forward, and when to fight. And right now, she was going to fight. Weaving through the guests, she followed David, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. He was just steps ahead of her, moving smoothly, never rushing. He didn't need to. He thought he would get away like he always had. But Linda wasn't going to let that happen. She reached him just as he neared the exit. Leaving so soon? Her voice was steady, but inside, adrenaline surged through her. David turned slowly, his polite smile still in place. Up close, his eyes were dark, empty. "Ah," he said smoothly. "Mrs. Carter, is it?" The way he said her name made her stomach turn. This man was dangerous. Linda squared her shoulders. "You've been watching her all night." David tilted his head, feigning confusion. "I'm sorry? I don't know what you mean." But Linda saw the flicker of amusement in his eyes, the way he enjoyed this game. He had played it before. "I know who you are," she said quietly, stepping closer. "And I know what you've done." David's smile faltered, just for a second. Then he exhaled, as if disappointed. "That's unfortunate," he murmured. And then, in one swift movement, he lunged. Linda barely had time to react before he grabbed her wrist, twisting it sharply. Pain shot up her arm, but she didn't cry out. She had expected this. With a surge of strength, she stomped down hard on his foot, yanking herself free. The noise caught the attention of nearby guests. Heads turned. A few people gasped. "Hey, what's going on?" Someone shouted. "Jake." Linda looked up to see her son pushing through the crowd, his face full of concern. Behind him, Sarah stood frozen, her face pale. David glanced around, realizing too many eyes were now on him. His jaw clenched. He had lost control of the situation. And then he ran. Linda wasn't about to let him disappear again. "Stop him," she yelled. Jake didn't hesitate. He took off after David, his long strides quickly closing the distance. Several other guests, now aware that something serious was happening, moved to block the exit. David shoved past them, knocking over a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. He reached the door, only to find a burly security guard stepping in his path. It was over. Within minutes, the police had arrived. David was handcuffed and led away, his face blank, his body still. But as he was pushed into the back of the police car, he turned his head just slightly, locking eyes with Sarah. A slow, eerie smile curled his lips, a silent message. "This isn't over." Sarah shuddered, but Linda stepped in front of her, shielding her from his gaze. "Yes, it is," Linda said firmly. David was gone. The nightmare was over. And for the first time in 5 years, Sarah Collins could finally breathe. Jake turned to her, his eyes searching. "Emily, Sarah, whatever your name is, tell me the truth. Did you ever love me?" Tears welled in her eyes. Every moment. Jake exhaled slowly, then pulled her into his arms. Linda watched as Sarah finally let herself collapse into Jake's embrace, years of fear melting away. The wedding would not continue that day, but something more important had happened. A truth had been set free. A woman had reclaimed her life, and a mother had protected her son. As Linda looked at Jake and Sarah, she realized that, despite everything, love had survived. And that was the most important thing of all.